Peace I leave with you. But the Lord adds, my peace I give to you. And he goes on, not as the world gives, do I give to you. And then he goes into the area of peace. Let not your hearts be troubled. And then he talks about fear. These words have come down the centuries in our liturgy. In the East, there is a very serene moment shortly before the people's encounter with the bread of angels. Peace unto all, as he comes out of the holy doors and invokes the peace of the Last Supper upon them. In the West, only the bishop has the right to begin the celebration with peace be with you. He is Christ for his people, Vox Christi for his diocese, and his voice is peace, coming precisely from the upper room. But also in the prayer that now is heard by the people, but should not be said by the people, the priest prays for not just some kind of cessation from hostilities, but for the peace of the kingdom. Let us look at this. In Welsh, there are 3 words. One is heddwch. It means a cessation of hostilities, absence of war and conflict. In the ritual of the gorsedd, that's the chairing of the bard, the archdruid has a sword and he begins to unsheathe the sword. And he asks, not once but 3 times, after an old invocation indicating what peace is, oes heddwch, is there peace? And thousands of voices reply, heddwch, peace. And he puts the sword back in the scabbard. So 3 times, and then and only then he says to the triumphant bard, Eistedded bardd an heddwch an Eisteddfod. Let the bard sit in the peace of the Eisteddfod. Eisteddfod is the place of sitting, Eistedd. And so, that is evoking peace from surrounding enemies and internal peace in the community. In the Eisteddfod, it is to do with beauty in all its forms, musical, literary, dramatic, choreographical, art, anything. And an old form of heddwch, a poetic one used in literature, is hedd. Now that already becomes not just a cessation of hostilities, but that serene mode of creating an atmosphere out of beauty. For imer hedd na oer y byd amdano. Actually, we sang it at my father's funeral, and my mother's, I think. And it is an old hymn And the words by a great poet, Haithwyn, give me the peace, but Haith, that the world knows nothing about. Very fitting as one lowers a body into the ground, dust unto dust, ashes unto ashes. Nim nawn, and wrth foi, we only go back to the great peace when we're actually fleeing it by our fudan fall, our mad bustle. For the last point is the peace and the silence of the grave. After that we hear no more. But then there is an internal mystery in the tomb. What is heard on the other side? And one can be sure that a soul of peace is more likely to encounter peace also on the other side than an unpeaceful specimen who was always at war with all around him and even himself. So here is a poetic form, elevated, an open invitation to higher things, made of beauty and harmony, which is an essential ingredient of beauty. Hence it is that when we see an absence of harmony and serenity in modern music, modern literature, we see precisely that there is no healing left, even in our own means of creating it. We prefer the vibes of hell. And there is then another word of a different root altogether, tagnevez. Now that is only used essentially in scriptural and liturgical contexts. It is that divine peace of which the Lord spoke, and it's the word that has come down from the old translation of 1588, and it is different from Heduch, and here we have it coming through here. And that we don't use in Welsh except in that context, indicating that that is the atmosphere of our life as Christians. Uncle Gwyn, who was an ordained minister and a great preacher, when saying goodbye, he would just wave his hand and say, Tag newydd, peace. And he had the authority to do so as a good and holy minister. We are called upon to be emitters of peace and not of anything else. Dignity and peace go well together, as do listening and the capacity not to invade. A peaceful soul is a receptive soul, and only a person in command of his interior is able to withhold his words. A nervous soul is not at peace and has to always emit words. St. Seraphim of Sarof was one of the greatest saints that the Eastern Orthodox Church has canonized, and he had a friend who would visit him and pray with him, and therefore would spend many hours praying with him. And that led to an all-night vigil one time, and as the sun began to break through the darkness of the mount, he noticed, his friend, that Seraphim was beginning to change. He was going into tranced mode, and his face was beginning to shine, and he could see he was in ecstasy. But he himself, his friend, being a soul friend, being close to him, was caught up in it, and they were somehow involved in it together, and not quite separated from each other. And Seraphim asked him, "What do you feel?" And he simply answered in all truth, I feel an immense well-being, a profound peace. And Seraphim answered, this is the peace of which the Lord spoke. And he was referring to this passage. A psychologist who does non-directive counselling can only talk with the person within the parameters of the person's own field of vision, and tranquilize quite often the person there where the person is actually hurting, the conscience. A psychologist cannot prescribe, but a psychiatrist can, and can even give tablets to give some kind of absence of turmoil, tranquilizers. But neither can make the person tranquil deep down. Why? There is no peace on the level of the conscience. The conscience is what tells us somebody is sure to find out. We are uneasy about certain things. Only forgiveness can heal, and only the Church can pronounce it with authority. There is a change in the level of the soul at the moment of absolution. The Holy Spirit comes and there is a washing. There is return to grace and more grace. And there is light. And in that light, made of an atmosphere of peace, the soul can be worked upon and is at rest. As between husband and wife, if the husband has been unfaithful, or the wife for that matter, there is no profound intimacy because there is a lie, a secret in the air. It's not the same as before, and one of the two might actually pick it up. It's the same with our God. One cannot screen the intimacy of the soul from God, nor can one snatch the gift of peace from Him because He gives it. There is only peace when two wills are wed completely. And then, even if apparently all is going awry outside, one is still anchored in that peace. It can be compared to a rough sea. In the middle of the ocean, there can be huge turmoil during a big storm. But if one is able to go down, down, down to the very ocean bed, there is no alteration at all. And so it is that the soul, if it is in a state of grace and forgiveness and intimacy with the one who made and rules the world, that soul can be on the ocean bed but not on the surface. There are several layers and strata in our being, and no matter what is going on the parameters, deep down we can rest, knowing that we're on the winning side and He is in control. He is Lord, He is Lord. He is risen from the dead, and He is Lord. Every knee shall bow, every tongue confess that Jesus